You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 330 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. And I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin. He would never bunt his third hitter with one out in a one-run game. He's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
I can smell the playoff air out my balcony.
Yes, the playoffs. This is so exciting. We've been talking about it for years. Our desire for meaningful baseball in September. We were asking for meaningful baseball in August. We've gotten greedy and have been asking for meaningful baseball in September. We've got it. There's a playoff push happening, and it's coming down to the wire. We will dive into all of the happenings coming up next week. The week that will be is very interesting. It's the final week of the season, and it's come down to this for the Cubs and like four other teams. So we're going to deep dive into that. We're going to celebrate the wins in the homestand the week that was. And to help us unpack all things Cubs and think about the playoffs ahead, it's a longtime friend of the show, Michael Ernst. Michael, thanks for jumping on and talking Cubs with us tonight.
You're welcome, sir.
Pat, let's start with you. How did we do on predictions last week?
I was spot on. I predicted the Cubs would go 5-1, and they did the next best possible thing. They went 4-2. Now, not the way I'd hoped to do it, but all's well that ends well. I said 5-1 because I wanted to give them a little wiggle room here, knowing that might not be possible. That would have been nice if they'd gone 5-1. But they're still in the hunt. They did what they needed to do after a pretty brutal week the week before. So it's just now crunch time.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the week before, they dropped 2 out of 3 in Colorado. They get swept by the Diamondbacks and get knocked out of their final playoff spot. They were bouncing in and out of that final playoff spot. And they go into this homestand playing Pittsburgh. And you watch them lose 2 out of 3. And
I watched them in person too. That was even more fun.
So you're like, they've lost 7 of 8 games. This panic was ensuing. This was not good. What a weekend to save the hopes of the season by taking 3 against Colorado. These were must-win games, Michael.
Yeah. I'm usually not in the any game is a must win, but at this point in the season, against a team like Colorado, it was pretty much must win with the way that the season was kind of sliding on the Cubs a little bit. And hey, I mean, the offense responded. I mean, even in the Pittsburgh series, the offense was definitely not the problem. I mean, they scored like 27 runs that in a 3-game series and only won one game because the bullpen couldn't do anything.
Had they lost 2 out of 3 to the Rockies, we would be having a different podcast right now.
Oh, very much so.
And it would not be about the playoffs. It would be about Ross and the future of the team and the structure of the lineups and roster. And so it was very necessary that happened.
I probably would have turned down that invitation.
Yeah, right.
That would have been a tough one to book a guest.
Oh, I've got a sore throat. I really can't talk for an hour, guys. I'm sorry.
I will say that when the Cubs finally did win a game against Pittsburgh on Tuesday, they did it so resoundingly that they evened up their run differential for the previous 5 games that they had lost. In typical Cubs fashion, and they've continued to expand on their very peculiar run differential, which means nothing and counts for nothing, but yet continues to give them hope, I think, that they're a better team than perhaps their record indicates.
When they lost the Justin Steele game, I think that's when panic was ensuing. Which games you were in attendance, Pat, for the Pittsburgh games? How bad did it get there?
Only the losses.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, clarify. The one I was really hoping that Kyle Hendricks in his last game at Wrigley Field, unless they make the second round of the playoffs, which is down the road, I was really hoping he would finish that series to win 2 out of 3 for sure. But also, I wanted him to go out with a win at Wrigley. His first game there was in July of 2014, and I was there for that, his first Wrigley game, and it just wasn't meant to be. Unfortunately, the Cubs, he and the Cubs fell behind as they often do, but then rallied back. Unfortunately, the bullpen let him down in that game. It's one of those situations where he only gave up 1 earned run. 2 of the runs were unearned. He went 6 innings, so it's not that he pitched terribly. He just he wasn't super sharp, but it was Boxberger and Merriweather who just kind of coughed it up and gave up 5 runs to the Pirates in the 8th and 9th innings. Oddly, the Cubs also scored 5 runs in the 8th and 9th innings, which made it even more frustrating, especially in the bottom of the 9th when Swanson hit a 2-run homer to cut the lead to 8-6. I kept thinking, gosh, if we just hadn't given up 3 runs in the top of the 9th, think where we'd be right now, but that's the way it goes. And because Palacios had hit a 3-run homer in the top of the 9th, so it was frustrating. And to lose 2 out of 3 in that series on the heels of being swept, as you pointed out, by Arizona and losing 2 out of 3 to Colorado, one could think that they were in a bad place. Plus, they lost 3 out of 4 to Arizona even before that, so they were really on a bad stretch. They went from being like 12 games over 500 after sweeping the Giants on September 6th, all the way to like 5 games over 500 on September 21st. So they lost 7 games in that period, and so I was not super excited, but the Rockies came to town and did what the Rockies do, which is let the Cubs off the hook, thankfully.
Yeah, the one note on the Rockies, I was at the game Saturday, but Michael, how awesome was it to see the ovation that Chris Bryant got? I'm a Chris Bryant guy, so I was thrilled that the Wrigley faithful gave him the standing ovation that this man deserved. So I was proud of. What did you think?
Unfortunately, I missed that live. I only caught up with it on highlights later. I think I joined that game in progress in like the 2nd or 3rd inning, something like that. So I did miss that and wasn't quite in the moment with it. But yeah, obviously they should give Chris Bryant a huge ovation like that. He's well deserving of it. And so I'm happy that he got such a warm welcome. I was less happy that, he continues to hit pretty well against the Cubs.
Always does, yeah.
He's really the only major threat in that lineup, and he's not really a major threat anymore. But he certainly did some damage against the Cubs this year.
Yeah, and going into the Rockies series, Michael, this bullpen,
it's scary.
Oh, it is. We took Adbert
Scary
Elzolay
good
for granted.
Scary good or no?
No, not scary good. Scary as in
I was hoping you knew something I didn't.
No, as in I don't trust anybody in their current role. All of them are being asked to take over responsibility that's probably 2 notches above where they should be. And yeah, that's a very scary proposition. There's been a couple of games that it's been bullpen losses, but there's been a few games like these Rocky series where they do just enough to get by. I'm just hanging on the hope that they can keep it together for another 6 games. We can probably afford for the bullpen to fall apart once, but Beyond that, we need Julian Merriweather to, if he's going to walk the bases loaded or put two guys on, he's got to keep coming back with those back-to-back strikeouts to end to end these rallies at the end here. And we need Drew Smiley to, I guess, be the setup man. It's really weird to consider Drew Smiley the setup man, but I guess that's who we got for the eighth inning. Him and Jose Cuas. Which, wow.
He might be our closer at the rate we're going.
I don't know. I think it's going to be Merriweather. I think he seems to be the guy that they're going to use. Well, it seems to be that Merriweather is going to be the guy that they see as the highest leverage. If the 3, 4, 5 hitters come up in the eighth inning, my guess is they would go with Merriweather in the eighth, sort of thing.
You say that as if there's not like an 80% chance that he gets hurt in the next 6 games.
Oh, well, yes. Yeah, we do have that. And that's why we are where we're at, obviously.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, we probably took Alzolay a little bit for granted, and or forgot that he is a guy who has historically had trouble getting or staying healthy. And so, I mean, we really shouldn't be surprised by this, but he really held that bullpen together from like May until, 2 weeks ago or whenever he got injured.
Surprisingly, I think he's the only person in the bullpen who doesn't walk people. That seems to be a successful thing for a closer or a setup man, is just not walking people. And for some reason,
yeah, absolutely.
The rest of the bullpen just has this real knack for being able to do that.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's that unusual because bullpen guys are generally failed starters, and the reason why you fail being a starter is because you don't throw enough strikes. That's generally what the thing is. So I think that's a fairly common occurrence for most bullpens to not throw a ton of strikes. But yeah, I mean, Alzolay, I'm very big on having at least one guy, be it the eighth inning or the ninth inning guy, that doesn't beat themselves, that is going to force the other team to put the ball in play. And especially with a defense like the Cubs have, it force the other team to win it. Don't give it to them. And right now we don't really have that. I mean, I guess probably the closest thing we have is Smiley. Although I feel like I'm forgetting something. I feel like there's one other guy down in the bullpen that doesn't really walk guys.
Hayden Wisniewski is probably the closest to that.
Gosh, I don't even know what to make of that.
He prefers 3-run home runs.
Game,
so there
good
you go.
one game, then bad the next. Good one game, bad the next.
The Cubs have rotated in guys who walk like 5, 6, 7 per 9 innings. I mean, it's really
it's generally just the inconsistency comes from the inability to throw strikes on a regular basis. I mean, we see it with Palencia, we see it with Cuas, we see it with Wisniewski.
Keegan Thompson.
I don't even know. I literally have no idea what to make of Keegan Thompson. That is just one of the more baffling fall-offs that I've seen in a while, because he apparently looks healthy, doesn't have the yips, but he's just not been the same guy from spring training day one until where we are now. I mean, he couldn't even keep his ERA under 10 in Iowa until like a week before he got called up by the Cubs. So and we had to get a save out of Keegan Thompson in the last month of the season. So that kind of tells you, that sums up how the bullpen has gone of late. So yeah, it's scary stuff, but like I said, for the most part, they've pieced it together when they've needed to. There's been a few frustrating games, like that extra inning game. Was that against the Rockies in the previous series? I can't remember, but like the Cubs took 4 leads in the extra
Arizona.
Yeah, was that Arizona? Yeah, I can't. That game was really frustrating.
I feel like there's this disturbing trend where the Cubs need to score. I mean, today being the exception, but they need to score at least 6 runs to win a game these days. don't always win if they score 6, but they almost need to, it feels like.
Yeah, and and thankfully they've got a really good offense. I mean, and I think that's kind of indicative of the not really the losing streak, but the rough patch that they hit, after the San Francisco series. Is for about 10 days there, the offense dried up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't even so much that they were like getting shut out or scoring 1 run. They were just scoring 2 or 3 or 4 runs. And the pitching staff at this point is not really built to withstand that. They need the offense to kind of score 4 or more. And
today was the first time in September the Cubs won a game without scoring at least 5 runs.
Oh, there you go. I mean, that's, because, and we really shouldn't say that it's just the bullpen, because it's been the starters too. We've gotten,
oh, sure. There's plenty
Justin Steele's has given up 6 runs in 2 straight starts, and that's the ace. So there have been games where the bullpen's been fine, but the starting, what was it yesterday that Stroman goes 3, gives up 3, and then the bullpen throws 6 shutout innings. So it isn't just the bullpen, but yeah, I don't really know what to make of it. You just hope they can hold on for 6 more days, and maybe somebody gets healthy for the playoffs. I don't know. I haven't really heard anything on Alzolay if that's a realistic option or not, but.
Yeah, it's sort of, it sounds iffy in a negative way to me.
That's kind of what I gather. But
like with Candelario, they're like, well, he's resuming baseball activities, but I'm not hearing that on Alzolay. So time's up, right? I mean,
right. Yeah, I mean, at least it's not like the Stroman situation where you need to build him back up to be a starter. For Alzolay, it's can he throw 1 inning? But yeah, it's.
Yeah, I was at the game on Saturday, and Stroman did make his return to the starting rotation. We talked about in a previous podcast that we thought that Stroman in the bullpen might be the answer we need.
I honestly still think he should be the closer.
Right. We kicked that around here. That Stroman as closer solves a lot of problems for you.
He'd be a guy that wouldn't give the game away. He'd force the other team to put the ball in play. I mean, he obviously hasn't been real sharp since he's been back, and honestly hasn't really been real sharp since London. But I
Thank you, Trey Mancini.
Yeah, I don't know. Just asking him to stretch back out, I have a hard time seeing him as a starting option in the wild card round.
If only they didn't need starting pitchers, they could have Stroman as the closer. Assad could pitch, middle relief. Smiley could pitch as a setup man. It'd be really great.
Yeah, and I do wonder if they've decided that, hey, maybe Assad is the more comfortable of the 2 pitching out of the bullpen. He's got a little more experience doing that. And so, I mean, that's the other option of don't give the game away is Javier Assad throws strikes. And so maybe he ends up being that guy in the 8th, 9th inning where, you just need somebody to go in there and force the other team to hit the ball. He
pitched 4 shutout innings in relief of Stroman and was absolutely excellent. Yeah, just a tremendous outing from Assad. And you want to see that he's been doing it from the starting rotation or the bullpen. He's just been like what a huge important part of this pitching staff. Assad's been here in the last few months. Unbelievable.
It reminds me very much of that one season where Glendon Rush basically saved the Cubs pitching staff, where, I mean, he would throw 3 innings one day, close a game, then a week later he's starting and throwing 6 innings. Assad's been very similar to that. The other guy that comes to mind is Terry Mulholland in 1998, where he was both the Cubs' number 1 starter and setup guy for the last 2 weeks of the season because Matt Karchner and Felix Heredia were 2 of the most awful trade deadline acquisitions in the history of Cubs baseball.
Oh, those are some heavy names.
I was going to say, he reminds me of Adrian Sampson from last year, who single-handedly prevented the Cubs from getting a top 4 draft pick by having pitching 21 games and starting 19 of them with a 3.11 ERA or whatever you had. I mean, it was. I
guess this is more reminiscent to me of good seasons in Cubs history rather than bad seasons. I was pulling from the competitive teams.
Yeah. Well, I guess next week we'll give us our answer on that one. But what do you make of, or what do you do with Jameson Taillon moving forward? Smiley can be a starter reliever, probably reliever. We've talked about Stroman, we talked about Assad, but what about Taillon? Is he one of your 3 or 4 starters that you're going to rely on, or do you just leave him off the playoff roster? What do you do with him?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I really haven't thought too much about the playoff roster, but as far as future, Taillon's going to be in the rotation.
This week he is, at least for one game against Atlanta.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And whether or not he's one of their 3 top starters, well, I mean, honestly, he's been better than Steele lately. I mean, obviously, you're going to give Steele a start. Beyond that, I mean, honestly, you could just pick him out of a hat who starts the second and third games of.
We can really confuse teams because we will keep them guessing as to who our starters are, since we don't know who they are.
Well, yeah, and I mean, honestly, they have the option of going with openers and stuff. I mean, did you go with Drew Smiley for an inning at the beginning of the game, or Javier Assad for an inning or 2, and then switch to Stroman, or vice versa?
This is David Ross making this lineup, so no. They could, but no.
We had Jose Cuas start a game this year and pitch 1 inning, and before giving way to Smiley. So yeah, I mean, I'm not completely throwing out that possibility, but
for a team that's on the verge of a playoff seed, I can't remember a Cubs team in my lifetime that's made the playoffs. That there have been several that has had more uncertainty in both their starting rotation and their bullpen all at once. We don't know who the starters should be. We don't know who the relievers should be. It's just a complete. It's week to week, game to game. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, really, 98 is the only other season that comes to mind. I mean, and honestly, how many playoff seasons can we actually recall in our lifetimes? We're not pulling from a huge sample size, but 98 is really the only. I
think 84, 89, 07, 08, even 03. Even 20, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, whatever. We knew who our starters were, at least.
We had really good health in pretty much all of those seasons. Very fortunate health luck, especially during the Theo era. The 2016 season, didn't they only have 4 starts that were made by somebody other than the top 5 guys? That's very unusual. Whereas this year, I think they've had an unusual amount of injuries and weirdness happen with things like Keegan Thompson and Jeremiah Estrada and guys that just, who knows what the heck happened to them. They just fell off a cliff. So I get that 98 was a mess, but I mean, Tapani and Traxel and Wood. Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of
Beck was the closer, and Mulholland was the setup man, and everything else was a free for all, right?
But we didn't have Wood. Remember, for the second half, he came out of nowhere to pitch that playoff game.
He did, yeah, and pitched well for 5
years. But was that good for him because he got hurt in training the next year,
and we got swept, by the Braves, I guess, because we marked Clark instead. I forgot the great Mark Clark. But I just think this year, I guess the weird part about this year, too, is that players' roles have changed so dramatically. We never, in the middle of June, we never would have been talking about, is Marcus Stroman a closer, or is he is he an opener? Is he a middleman? Right. Is he a starter? We were so sure that it was Stroman, Steele, and somebody, right? One thing we knew in the middle of June, it sure as hell wasn't Jameson Taillon. That guy wasn't even going to make a playoff roster, right? It was probably going to be Smiley or Hendricks at that point. And then, things get turned on their head, and then Assad comes out and, comes up big when they weren't relying on him, and Taillon has his hot streak for a while. And then don't forget, that's before Alzolay was even the closer. So then you throw that into the mix, and just what a crazy season.
Yeah, I guess my thinking is, Steele's going to start. Hendricks is going to start. They're not going to use Hendricks out of the bullpen. So
no.
That's two of your three starters. And the fact that they are stretching Stroman back out, to me, tells me he's going to be the third guy. And if you would have asked us in June, I don't think that would have been that big of a surprise that it's Steele, Stroman, and Hendricks.
If I'd asked you a week ago, it would have been kind of a surprise.
Well, yes. But yeah, I would definitely expect Hendricks and Steele for certain. And then Stroman, it's probably touch and go with how he performs in his next start and how many pitches he throws, that sort of thing.
Question for you, Michael, about Jordan Wicks, another guy who has been a key contributor in the starting rotation for the past few months. Is he a bullpen possibility, or is he just like he's a starter, or we're not going to see him?
Given that they haven't trusted Luke Little at all, I think there's a possibility that they could use Wicks out of the bullpen. Obviously he's probably a little better against righties because of the changeup, but he at least gives you an option as a lefty besides Smiley.
Do you think they're afraid to use him out of the bullpen because he doesn't miss bats as much as some of the other guys? Is that is there a inherent bias that if you come in out of the bullpen, I guess it depends on your bullpen role, but certainly anybody who's going to be pitching in the 7th, 8th, or 9th innings, they kind of like guys who can get strikeouts and
that's certainly the preference. But Ross has shown no hesitation to go to Assad when he was in the bullpen, and Wicks is performing fairly similarly to Assad. And I think Wicks has that same sort of bulldog mentality that Assad has. And so I think mentally he's well suited to the bullpen. So I wouldn't be scared to throw him in there. The stuff is probably not ideal for it, but we aren't going to have ideal options for the bullpen this playoffs. So you got to make do.
Before he gets to that point, he is likely to start the game where the Cubs clinch a playoff spot this year.
Well, there you go. And
next Saturday,
I have full faith in him.
That's right. Yeah, let's take a look at the schedule in the week that will be here, as we do want to see the Cubs clinch a playoff spot sometime this week, as the Cubs are in Atlanta for 3 games and then in Milwaukee for 3. The games in Atlanta Tuesday, Justin Steele's pitching. Wednesday, Jameson Taillon. And Thursday, Marcus Stroman. So no Hendricks in Atlanta. So this is
that's 3 wins in a row right there. There's no doubt with those 3 pitchers going. No bumps in the road there.
The good news is, let's look at the standings real quick, then we'll talk about the rest. But as of the time of this recording on a Sunday night, as of Sunday night, the Cubs are in the 3rd wild card spot. They are a half game behind Arizona, who's in the 2nd wild card spot. They have Miami right behind them, 1 game out behind the Cubs, and Cincinnati 2.5 out. Seems 2.5 feels insurmountable at this point, but with 1 game to go, with 1 game behind, it's Miami, it's Chicago, it's Arizona jockeying for these last 2 wild card spots.
Well, technically there are 7 teams if you count, obviously, the Phillies, who are in the driver's seat, but also don't forget the Padres and Giants are still lurking. They would have to win out, and the Cubs would have to lose out but shy of that, you're right. They will not be participating in the postseason.
It's been an amazing. The Padres have gone 9-1 in their last 10 games.
Turning it on,
and they are
honestly. This is what
differential.
I expected them. I expected them to make the same kind of run in the second half that the Cubs did.
Absolutely,
and, I think everybody did. Yeah, they are just as talented, maybe even slightly more talented than the Cubs. And I think they're in the same tier as the Brewers, the Cubs, and the Phillies.
I think they're more talented than the Cubs if you really just look at player by player.
They probably a little bit.
They don't fit well together, but that's a whole nother,
Right. Yeah, I think the Cubs have a little bit more defense and stuff, but yeah, I think we underestimate the Cubs defense, and up until the last few weeks, I think the base running has been a huge positive for the Cubs this season. That's been another thing that's been frustrating over the last few weeks, though, is all of the outs that they've been making on the bases has killed rallies. And, but
the defensive lapses they've made during this losing stretch sort of remind you of how good they were before that. Because I forgot you can make errors.
Right, you just expect them to make the play, and it's we've had a few issues of late, but
the weird thing about the Padres is looking at all the teams that we mentioned that are in this wild card race. Arizona, Miami, Cincinnati all have negative run differentials, but the Padres have plus 91 run differential.
And the Cubs are about the same, I think.
Yeah, they're 101 for the Cubs.
101, So.
And the Padres had to win 9 out of 10 to get within 2 games of 500. That's how far back they were.
Right.
I saw
they were at 90. They were looking at 90 losses before their hot streaks. So good for them.
Yeah, apparently the Padres were 0-12 in extra inning games.
Yeah, so that's just it's a freaky thing, and Miami is basically the exact opposite. They're like 15 games over 500 in 1-run games or something like that, and that's just not sustainable.
No, if the Padres went 6-6 in extra inning games, they'd be 82-73 in sole possession of the second wild card spot.
Exactly. Yeah. There's very weird things that can happen in a baseball season, but that's just the sort of stuff that doesn't carry over from one season to the next. And we really shouldn't expect the Marlins to be able to keep pace with the Padres next year if they bring back similar teams. It's just it's not. It's two different talent levels.
Good news for the Cubs right now is while the Giants and Padres are each 5 games behind the Cubs with 6 games to go, the Cubs miraculously also have the tiebreaker against both those teams. So tying the Cubs is not enough. They would have to actually be a game ahead of the Cubs, which would require them both to win out while the Cubs lose all 6. I'm not saying that can't happen, but, the Giants do have to play the Padres and Dodgers on the road in 6 games. So I feel like it's probably not going to happen.
Well, and I mean, obviously, with the Padres and Dodgers playing, or the Padres and Giants playing each other, they can't.
One of them will not win out.
Yeah, they can't both. No, they cannot. Conversely, the Phillies, who have a pretty commanding lead right now,
I think they're
5-game lead. Now they finish up with the Pirates for 3 and the Mets for 3. So I feel like they're going to be able to win 1 or 2 of those games easily and probably clinch pretty soon. So that takes 1 playoff spot off the table. But I wouldn't give up necessarily on this Arizona spot. They've got 7 games left because they had the rain out. So they're looking at playing at the Yankees tomorrow, a Yankees team that's over 500, mind you, which is better than the Padres Giants. Unfortunately for the Cubs, they then travel to Chicago to play the White Sox for 3. So, that's going to be rough. But then it gets
that Thursday game at Guaranteed Rate Field against the White Sox, $1 tickets and free parking.
$1 everything. Yeah.
It's insanity. I'm so tempted
I know.
to go.
Why wouldn't you? Just go.
I thought it was insanity too. I'm like, why are they charging $1? Like, that seems like it should be like 50 cents. But anyway, what makes it interesting for the Diamondbacks, and this will be something to look at, is that they finished the season with 3 games against an Astros team who are both very good, but also in a dead heat with the Mariners for a playoff spot. So we could find ourselves in a spot where the Astros desperately need to win. They're playing the Diamondbacks. Meanwhile, the Cubs at that point will be playing. The Cubs have 3 games at the Braves and 3 at the Brewers. But by the time the Cubs get to that Brewers series, not only will the Brewers have completely locked in, I think, their playoff spot. If they haven't, it's only because the Cubs still haven't gotten there yet. But the Brewers cannot get the 1st or 2nd seed in the playoffs. Right. If they win the division, they get the 3rd seed. They're 6 games ahead of the Cubs. So they basically, unless the Cubs won out and they lost out, they're going to get there. But I think when the Cubs get to the Brewers, you're not going to be seeing Burns and Woodruff and these guys. They'd be insane to use those guys because it's right before the first round of the playoffs.
You're setting your playoff rotation.
Yeah,
right? That's what they're doing.
Yeah, your rotation for 2 days later, mind you. So the Cubs are going to be facing a bunch of backups, and hopefully not Christian Yelich or William Contreras and others. And that could actually be, although it looks ominous to say, we have to play a team that's got almost 90 wins. That could be a lot easier for the Cubs than, say, the Diamondbacks playing the Astros might be.
Yeah, well, and the same goes for the Atlanta series. I mean, Atlanta doesn't have anything to play for right now. The Brewers don't have anything to play for. And, I mean, even Atlanta, Atlanta's dropped a series to the Marlins. They've dropped a series to the Phillies just within the last couple of weeks. They just lost a game to the Nationals of all teams. So, it's not like they are this unbeatable juggernaut. That's right. I mean, they are a very good team, probably the best team, but baseball isn't football. You can beat the very good teams. And
they're guaranteed a bye in the first round of the playoffs. Right. They have a 4-game lead over the Dodgers. They also own the tiebreaker versus the Dodgers. Not that finishing 1st or 2nd really matters a whole lot, but for just assuming they want to finish 1st, they're in great shape to do it. And 2 of their 4 best pitchers are not going to be pitching against the Cubs because Morton and Fried are both out with injuries.
Exactly.
In fact, interestingly enough, they're going to use Elder in Game 1, who's pretty good, but then they haven't even decided who's going to pitch in Game 2 or 3, probably because they're thinking, well, do you really want to risk, when you've already got a couple guys hurt, do you want to risk bringing Spencer Strider out there and hurting his arm or whatever? So the Cubs may see some easy games against the Braves as well, which would fit in nicely in the Cubs' attempt at trying to get the 2 spot over the Diamondbacks. But even if the Cubs can't overcome the Diamondbacks, who are half a game ahead, but really a game and a half because of the tiebreaker, the Cubs still have a 1-game lead over the Marlins, which I suppose is more important because you got to get in, right? The Marlins play a pretty light schedule. They're at the Mets for 3 and at the Pirates for 3, all on the road, but still against teams that are, I don't know, are they pesky? Hard to say. They're up and down, right? The Cubs are going to need to win their games to fend off the stupid Marlins, I think. And to Jeremy's point, the Reds are 2.5 back. And they play, I don't know why they're 2.5 back. There must be a game here, extra game they have to play. But I know they're playing at the Guardians and at the Cardinals. That's 6 road games. Again, not against the toughest teams you've ever heard of, but it's still, they're still so far behind that, and despite having, it's only 2 games against Cleveland. That's why they're in a worse shape because they only have 5 games left. That's why it's 2.5 games behind. And so as long as the Cubs don't end up tied with them, they won't be an issue either.
Yeah, I still have quite a bit of hope. And I mean, if in all honesty, the 3rd wild card is actually preferable to the 2nd wild card with the way that the playoffs are stacking up, you want to avoid the Braves, even with their recent injuries. because the Dodgers also have rotation issues. I mean, do they know who they're going to throw 4 starters out there for a playoff series? I don't think they do.
No.
So, health-wise, if all of the Braves and the Dodgers and the Cubs were healthy, I would probably give the advantage to, Atlanta and the Dodgers, a little bit. But with the way all 3 of these teams are beat up, if the Cubs can get in, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could, put up a little bit of a fight at least against any one of the teams that are in the playoffs. So
it's quite possible the Cubs could face Lance Lynn in a playoff game against the Dodgers as a starting pitcher. Given,
but he throws a 4-seam fastball, and that's like kryptonite to the Cubs. So they're not scoring 6 runs in that game. So, or at least they're not scoring 6 runs while he's in there. If they bring in a 2-seamer.
But you forget Miles Mastrobuoni could be in the lineup, and that could change everything.
Well, he is the only guy that can hit a 4-seam fastball.
Yeah. So
the other thing
is
one
of the guys
if Lance Lynn only throws 6 innings and they bring in a 2-seam guy in the 7th, the Cubs could score like 7 runs that inning. That's,
for sure.
So
when you look at the playoff picture, where do you both stand in terms of the Cubs actually making the playoffs? Now, keep in mind the Cubs do not have the tiebreaker versus the Diamondbacks, the Marlins, the Reds, or the Phillies. But still, they have a 1-game lead over the Marlins. Is this something you see as a likelihood the Cubs make the playoffs?
I do. I've remained ever since the trade deadline, and they decided not to sell, and they convinced themselves they were going to go for it. I've been fully on board that this is a playoff team. They were better than the teams that they were chasing, and they chased them all down and jumped ahead of them, a couple of them into playoff position. They have fallen off a little bit due to the injuries this year or this September. And the bullpen does scare me. I have maybe a slight bit more of doubt than I had a couple of weeks ago, but I'm still very much in the Cubs are just they're better than the Marlins. They're better than the Reds. And I have to have hope, especially with the fact that they have a 1-game and a 2.5-game lead, that they're going to hold on to it. So that's where I'm at.
I don't have a good read on Miami, the team, because this is the team that just a week ago swept Atlanta and then lost 2 out of 3 to the Mets and then took 2 out of 3 from Milwaukee. So
they're very much like a middle of the pack team, and they're gonna be good sometimes, bad sometimes, and that's just who they are.
So I have confidence looking at these. So it's you mentioned, Pat, 3 against the Mets and 3 against Pittsburgh. I feel it's going to come down. It's going to come down to the wire. This is a Cubs get that last spot by a game because Miami's going to be pesky. It's going to come down to the last ones, but then you'll see the Cubs get that final wild card spot against by keeping Miami out of that last playoff spot. I think Arizona is going to rack up some easy wins against the White Sox, and it's going to lock them into that second spot.
I see Cubs fans flood Comiskey on the dollar baseball day, and they cheer the White Sox to victory.
Somebody's got to do it. I will tell you that I think, well, I don't think, I'm almost positive the Cubs are going to make the playoffs. 80% sure. And I think they're going to clinch it on the Saturday before the end of the season, thereby giving them an extra day of rest. Steele will not have to pitch on Sunday, but instead will be able to pitch in the first game. Ideally, in my mind, in Milwaukee, because I'd like to go, but we'll see about that. And I think that's where we're going to end up, and we're going to be having some playoff baseball. It'll be fun, hopefully, and with any luck, it won't be a repeat of 2020 when the Cubs lost those 2 games to the Marlins. Did the Cubs even score a run in those 2 games? It was awful.
That was awful, just awful.
Yeah, I think this will be better, more entertaining for sure.
I must have blocked that out because I have no recollection of what you're talking about.
Oh, the 2020 playoffs. Yeah, that was
the
a
first
fun
time
one.
they did the expanded playoffs. Oh, is it miserable?
I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
No,
Yeah.
I do remember the Rockies wild card game.
Oh, I was at that
I
game.
did happen to attend that. That was the last game I attended at Wrigley. So
yes,
that's a pretty brutal one. But 2020 was one of those awful. And I should be used to it because 2007 and 2008, the last 3 games of 2003, all were defeats. I think the Cubs lost how many playoff games in a row did they lose until 2015 when they finally beat the Pirates in the play-in game. But 2020 was a bad finish to what was otherwise, I guess, a good half year because only 50 games. But I do hope the Cubs make the playoffs, and I'd like to see them, do a little bit better than that. It'd be nice to be competitive in the playoffs also.
Yeah, so let's do quick predictions for the week then, Pat. We'll start with you. Final 6 games.
What about them? What are the Cubs going to do?
What is the Cubs' record? What is their record? You said they're making the
4-2. They're 4-2.
4-2 week. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm feeling 3-3 this week, and I think that'll be.
You're close. You're close to 4-2.
I think the Cubs are going to take 2 out of 3 from Atlanta, and then 1 out of the first 2 games against Milwaukee, and then, like Patrick was saying, maybe that'll be enough where the final game won't matter, and so I don't care if they go. I don't care if they go 3-3 or 4-2. That's what I'm hoping.
Yes, I agreed. We don't care about the last game because
Kloss can start that one.
Yes.
Right.
No, we need our closer ready for the first game.
We need our closer.
Our closer.
Well, that's. Yeah, no,
I thought our closer was Keegan Thompson. Wait, time out. What's going on?
So if the Cubs if the Cubs do make the playoffs, they will play either. It looks like they'll play either Philadelphia or Milwaukee. You mentioned, Pat, that you'd rather see Milwaukee. Is that just for logistics, or is that a better matchup?
It's hard to say what the matchups are, right? You got to just beat the team that's in front of you. Clearly, I just, the Cubs have actually played. I feel like the Cubs have played the Brewers well this year, and even their good starters, the Cubs, their offense is really not that great, and I think the Cubs can stay in games with them. I worry about the offense of Philadelphia because when it's hot, Real Muto and Turner and Harper and Castellanos and Schwarber, it's a lot of lumber there. And,
yeah, it is.
And also, it's tricky because Zach Wheeler is really good as a starter. You only need a couple starters, and Aaron Nola has had our number, even though he's not having a great year this year, and and Walker's pretty good. I worry that, of course, getting to Craig Kimbrell in the bullpen might be kind of fun for the Cubs. It could be a little bit of he owes us a little bit on that one, but I just view the Phillies as a little bit tougher matchup. Plus, I do think that there will be a large number of Cubs fans in attendance in Milwaukee, so it'll be nice to cheer the team on, and maybe that will help spur them on. I don't know. It's I know I shouldn't say this, but I just haven't. I haven't. I'm not a believer in the Brewers. I know they've got a good manager and they win a lot of close games, but they don't bowl me over.
Michael, do you think it's a better matchup for the Cubs?
I'm kind of with Pat. I think the two teams are similar enough in talent level. They obviously have different strengths and weaknesses. Sure, the Phillies bats scare me a little bit, but the Cubs score quite a few runs themselves, so they might be able to hang with them. And if they can hang, the Cubs defense is vastly superior. So that could be a deciding edge.
Do they even wear gloves, by the way? The Phillies in the field?
I'm not sure. From some of the stats I've seen, I'm not sure. I can't say that I watch all of their games, but honestly though, I just want to face the Brewers. It would just be fun.
Yeah,
so much fun.
And the pressure's all.
It would be
Brewers.
fun for the fans. It would be fun for the
best part.
players. Yeah. I just why would I'm not afraid of it. If the Brewers are better, they'll win, and if the Cubs are better, they'll win.
The Brewers lineup only has 2 players who have OPS pluses above league average.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, goodness.
Yeah, the Phillies, the Cubs, and they're all very similar teams. They have good portions of their roster. They also have flaws that can expose them to bad losses, and it's just going to be a coin flip, I think, between any of those 3 teams. So I just prefer, let's just face the division opponent and give them a matchup. We all hoped that the final 3 games of the season would be a battle for the division title. We didn't give the Brewers that, so let's give them a run in the playoffs. That's what I say.
I like
and
it.
The Phillies have 8 players with OPS pluses over league average. So I'm just saying.
You sold me. Yeah.
But they have 8 players with DRSs of like -10. So
sure,
it all evens out.
Yeah, if you can actually put the bat on the ball. And I would also like to see Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos, but I'd like to see them maybe in another round, not in the first round. How about that? That would be a little bit painful for me.
All right, Pat, any last questions for Mike before we wrap it up and call it a podcast?
Yeah, I have one question for you. Now that we're sort of at the end of the season here, based on where the Cubs started the season and what our expectations were, which I don't think was quite as high as where we're at, what one player on the Cubs has most surprised you in a positive way this year?
Most surprised me in a positive way. Javier Assad is definitely up there.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly have some doubts as to whether he could sustain a full season of success as well as he has, given that, he does give up contact, but I think he's answered some of those doubts by, he's thrown a little harder, those sorts of things. I think Mastrobuoni has shown a lot of guts to kind of fight through the struggles that he really had in the first half of the season, and to show up in these last handful of games and make a positive impact after sitting out for so long. I think that's a really nice thing to see. And I think overall, just the fact that they've managed to piece together a bullpen that didn't doom the season, even if it ends up collapsing in the last 6 games. The amount of injuries and fall off that they've had to still be in this position is a real credit to the organization, I think, just as a whole, where, other than Alzolay, none of these guys were really huge prospects. You're taking waiver wire guys like Merriweather. That's another good positive that I really wasn't sure what to expect out of him. But yeah, they just keep piecing together these bullpens and making it work. And I think that's a good sign for the team. And, hopefully heading into the off season, there's going to be money available. They won't necessarily have to go waiver wire shopping. They can maybe set their sights a little higher sort of thing. And, and add into it with some higher level prospects. And yeah, let's kind of take the step from piecing things together to really nailing it. And so, yeah, I think those couple of things are the positives that I'll take away. But I will take issue also with you saying that none of us expected them to be here. My whole thing was, hey, if Bellinger becomes Bellinger again, this team can be exactly where they are at right now. So,
that may be one of the biggest surprises, is his turnaround to not just being good, but being very, very good.
Yeah, it is nice to see the Cubs actually fix a hitter rather than just fixing pitchers. I mean, we've seen them fix bullpens in the past. We have not seen them turn around a guy like Bellinger. So that's another positive sign that I will take into the offseason as, hey, maybe we're figuring that side of the player development and thing out. So yeah, it's just been a season of a lot of positives. I think I tweeted out earlier today where it's like, hey, the Cubs have already guaranteed themselves a 500 season this year, above 500 season this year. And 6 months ago, all of us would have been happy with that. So,
Michael Ernst, always a great time catching up with you. Please remind our listeners how they can follow you on X and get all of your thoughts, not only on the Cubs, but also the Hawks and the Bears.
MJ_Ernst, ERNST.
Excellent. Always a great time. And you can follow us on all of the social media platforms at Wrigleyville Nat. You can also support the show at our Patreon, patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. That is how we keep the show ad-free. It's because of all of our generous patrons who, every penny they give us goes right back into the show, and we appreciate every single one of them. We don't have to run ads for another full season. This has been incredible. We want to keep that run going, so thank you to all the patrons. The best way to support the show, if you can't support the show financially in these times, we get that as well. Best way to support the show is to tell your Cub fan friends about the show. Show them how to subscribe to the podcast. If you're already subscribed to the podcast, leave us a comment, rate, review. We love the 5 stars in the comments. We read every single one of them, and they help us work the algorithm so that other Cub fans can find the show. Also, throwing a subscribe. We put the audio version of the podcast up on YouTube as well. If you go to youtube.com, search Wrigleyville Nation Podcast, you will find this podcast. If you give us a subscribe there, that also helps people find podcasts. It's insane how many people find podcasts via YouTube. It's one of the biggest search engines in the world. So if you could give us a subscription there as well, it also helps Cub fans find the show. And with that, we are going to wrap it up, call it a podcast. Pat, any last words?
Go Cubs. I'm excited about talking playoffs next week.
I am as well. And thank you for joining us. Thanks to Michael Ernst. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.